Hello again, friends. I had something I wanted to share with you again today. Um, my grandfather had a very interesting way of getting my attention after he passed away. This is something that I don't think I've ever shared publicly. To my knowledge, this will be the first time I have ever come to the public with this story. I want to lay a little bit of a foundation first, though. Um, Many of you know, like I've said, I was raised by my grandparents. I was taken away from my parents when I was 2. Didn't meet my biological parents till years later. I think I met my mother when I was 10, met my father when I was about 16, somewhere around there. So my grandparents were the only parents that I ever had. When I was 16, my grandmother passed away, which was pretty devastating. That was the only mom that I ever had. And when I was 23, and this was 11 years ago on Monday, October 24th, 2011. I came home and found my grandfather dead on the floor. This devastated me, like beyond words. Turned me into a completely different person. I have not been the same person since that day. Um, if I was to technically say that there was one event that happened in my life that actually kicked off my spiritual awakening, it would have been that. I would have to say that it would have been that. It was a rough, rocky start, but that's what put me on the path. I didn't move and make any headway down that path for several years, but that's what put me on the path. Anyway, I wanted to just kind of lay that foundation. At this point in time in my life, I was a very profound, you could call me an agnostic leaning towards atheist, you know? I was much more in favor of the possibility that there was probably nothing beyond this world. I was kind of open to it. Like, I didn't really want to technically say I believed one way or the other, but I leaned much more towards there's probably nothing. Just to let you know where I was at this point in time in my life when I was 23 years old and strung out on drugs, and I was a mess. I was a mess back then. Anyway, it started when we were at his funeral home. The not the actual funeral itself, but the funeral home where you go and the family meets for a few days and the body's laying there and whatnot. And the first day that I went there, my family members and I were sitting out in front of the funeral home smoking cigarettes. And we're talking, we're in the middle of our conversation and whatnot, and the door of the funeral home popped open. And that was weird. Hmm. It was the wind. Wind blew it open. So my aunt walked over and shut the door, walked back, and we're continuing our conversation. And again, pow, the door popped open. Hmm. There must be the air pressure or something. You know what I mean? This is just my way of thinking. I'm just explaining it away. And my aunt walked back over there again, shut the door, and shook it. It was weird. So again, we're talking and whatnot and smoking. And again, a third time, the door popped open. And I can remember at that point in time me thinking, I wonder if that was Papaw. That's what we called him, Papaw. I wonder if that was Papaw. Nah, it was just the wind. Just the air pressure in the room was probably funny. Something, maybe there's somebody in there we don't know about that came and was jimmying with the door. Something. So I kind of buried that and stuffed it away and forgot about it. Well, fast forward maybe a week or two later, somehow, I don't really remember exactly how or why this happened, but I ended up with his cell phone, my grandfather's cell phone. Mind you, this is back in 2011. Cell phones were not what they are today. So it was like one of those kind of like a BlackBerry looking cell phone that had a screen and a a flat keyboard on it. It wasn't a flip phone, but it was around that same era, you know. I had a flip phone. And then when my grandfather passed away, you remember those old school cell phones had SIM cards in them. You remember that? And I took my SIM card out of my phone and put it in the cell phone that was my grandfather's. That was like basically all I got out of him, passing away. Anyway, one day I was out. We were out running around doing whatever, and I noticed that the cell phone battery was on red. It was about to die. So I remember thinking, "Oh, I gotta get this phone on the charge." And remember, if y'all can remember back then, we didn't sit around all day and play on our phones like we do now. Not really. I don't even. I mean, yeah, I think you could kind of connect to the internet and kind of, sort of like play around on Facebook. It was very difficult, and most people just didn't even do that. Anyway, so we're out running around. The cell phone battery's about to die, and I make a mental note. I got to plug this up to the charger really soon. About an hour later, I pulled it out of my pocket, and the battery icon was flashing. It was flashing, just like it did when you plug it up to a charger. When you would plug this phone up to the charger, the battery icon would flash to let you know it was charging. And then until the battery got a full charge, then it would be a full battery and it would stop flashing. And it's flashing. And I'm like, what in the world? That's a weird malfunction. What's going on here? And I start noticing that the charge is increasing on the phone. And I'm like, whoa, this phone is screwed up, dude. It thinks it's charging? Huh. That's weird. Well, I'm going to have to remember to stick this thing on the charger when I get home, because it thinks it's charging and it's not. Like, I'm nowhere near a charger. It's in my pocket. We're out running around. So it flashed and flashed and flashed and flashed and flashed until it had a full battery, and then it stopped flashing. And I'm like, well, out of curiosity, I wonder how long I can keep using this phone before it dies, because it thinks it's charged and it's not. It hasn't touched a charger. And back then, I don't know if cell phone batteries lasted longer or if it was just the simple fact that we weren't playing on them 24/7. But I can remember back then, I could go, a couple days without having to put it on the charger. You remember that? Anyway, and I never had to plug it up to a charger. And I was like, how could that be? What in the world? And the battery would, slowly decrease and decrease and decrease until it was on red again. And then again, right around the time that it was time for me to plug it up to a charger, it would start flashing. And I'd be like, I'm blown away. I'm like, what is going on with this phone? Flashing, 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 flashing. And man, I just can't figure out how this thing thinks it's charging, but it's not. And it would flash and flash till it got a full charge, then it would stop flashing. 2 weeks. I never had to plug this phone up to a charger. 2 weeks. 2 straight weeks. Every time it would get down to red, it would start flashing and it would charge itself. Like, the phone would charge itself. It didn't touch a phone charger for 2 straight weeks. 2 straight weeks. And that is when it was getting harder and harder and harder for me to explain it away. you know, I was at a loss. I was at a complete and total loss. So, right around this time, again, this is late 2011. So, this is probably around, let's see, he died on the 24th of October. So, this was probably around early November. Right around this time, I'm 23, about to turn 24 in the following February. That's when it's just driving me so insane. I'm like, there's something more than this world. There's something else going on out there. and it kept me awake at night. It kept me awake at night. And I'll never forget my very first baby steps onto the spiritual path was me going to a computer. Because remember, we didn't do this stuff on phones back then. Me going to a computer and typing in how did I word it? I went to Google and typed in scientific proof of the soul. I was thinking, man, there's got to be a scientist out there that has proof that we have a soul. And that's what sparked it from that point. That's what and I don't think I would have done that. I seriously don't think that I would have made that decision and taken my first little bitty baby step onto the spiritual path if my phone didn't charge itself for 2 straight weeks. Yeah, it was wild. It was crazy. But again, that was 2011. Oh, and the story that I shared with you the other night about my suicide attempt and whatnot, that was it's funny, it's right around that same time of year too, around Thanksgiving time. It was the week before Thanksgiving, 2014. So something about Scorpio season is a little bit weird and trippy. So anyway, though, yeah, I just wanted to share that experience with you guys. I got a couple of interesting interviews lined up for this channel, but every time I think of something very interesting that I have never brought to the public, I'm going to come on here and share it on this channel. Thank you all for tuning in. I'm going to get out of here. Y'all have a good day.